The night before the crash, that concrete post in my yard was just another piece of decorative landscaping. Something small and quiet that only I and a few close friends really understood. But the morning Mallory Pierce met it with the front wheel of her white BMW. It turned into the loudest statement I've ever made in my life. A solid chunk of physics that finally told an HOA bully no, in a language she couldn't ignore. For 3 months, like clockwork, she'd cut straight across my corner lot in Cedar Ridge Estates, her BMW X5 roaring over my brand-new Kentucky bluegrass, spraying gravel, chewing irrigation lines, acting like the extra 30 seconds it took to stay on the actual road was some kind of human rights violation, and I'd stand there with my coffee, watching tire tracks carve through the lawn I'd built for my wife, and feel my chest tighten with that familiar mix of anger and helplessness you get when people know they're hurting you and just don't care. My name's Logan Carter, 52, union electrician, 30 years wiring everything from malls to trauma centers. The guy whose entire career has been about making things solid, permanent, safe. The guy inspectors call when they need something done right the first time. That corner lot wasn't just another house. It was the retirement dream I bought for my wife Emily, who's fighting early-stage Parkinson's, whose world has shrunk from road trips and hiking to good days and bad days on the couch, whose hands tremble too much now to tend the flower beds she once lived in. So I did what I knew how to do. I poured 3 decades of overtime into the ground. Premium Kentucky bluegrass, underground irrigation timed by controllers I wired myself. Soil so rich it smelled like chocolate cake when I turned it over. A little green square of peace where Emily could sit on the porch and feel something growing instead of breaking. The first time I saw the ruts, I told myself it was a mistake, someone misjudging the turn. But the second morning, same tracks, same path, same heavy stink of burned rubber and diesel. And by the third day, I had a camera up on the soffit, pointed right at that corner, and there she was, Mallory Pierce, highlights so bright you could see the salon bill from space, sunglasses on, one hand on the wheel, one on her phone, cutting the corner like she owned the zip code. I tried to handle it like a normal neighbor, walked up to the biggest McMansion on the hill, knocked on the black double doors of House Pierce, and introduced myself. Hey, I'm Logan from the corner. I think you've been driving across my yard. And she didn't even fully turn to face me, just smirked over her shoulder and said, "It's a free country, sweetheart. Maybe don't plant so close to the road if you can't handle a little traffic." When I mentioned survey stakes and property lines, her whole energy shifted. The smirk turned surgical, and she dropped the line that told me exactly what kind of war I was in. My husband Grant built half of Cedar Ridge Estates. I sit on the Cedar Ridge Community Association board. We make the rules here. And guys who cause problems for us, their lives get very, very complicated. Walking back across gravel I'd paid for with 30 Christmases of overtime, I saw Emily watching through the window, fingers shaking around a mug she could barely hold, fear written across her face because she'd seen that type of person before, the kind who thinks money and connections mean they never have to be decent. That night, I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by code books and old job notes, and something in me hardened. Because if there's one thing an electrician understands, it's foundations, and I knew this much. If Mallory wanted a fight on the ground, she picked the wrong guy. I started small, like any good system. I went to Redwood Supply and Hardware, where my old buddy Frank Russo keeps every part a tradesman's heart could want, bought motion sensors, low-voltage lights, weatherproof connectors, and spent the weekend building a polite, code-perfect wall of light along my property line. A glowing suggestion that this was, in fact, someone's home, not a shortcut. Monday morning, 7:47 a.m., the sensors fired as soon as her front bumper crossed the line, 8,000 lumens turning her windshield into a tiny sun. The screech of brakes that followed was better than caffeine, but she still punched it across my grass, horn blaring like I'd insulted her bloodline. By Thursday, she was back in black athleisure at midnight, kicking over my lights one by one, jaw clenched, not realizing the backup cameras, wired to a battery system I designed, saw every swing of her designer sneakers. The next day, a violation letter from the Cedar Ridge Community Association, citing excessive illumination and disruptive security features, showed up in my mailbox, signed by none other than Mallory Pierce, treasurer, and I pushed down the temptation to laugh, called my insurance, filed a vandalism claim, and waited while their investigator, Calvin Reed, paced my corner with a laser measurer and a frown, finally saying the sentence that changed everything. "Mr. Carter, I think your property markers are in the wrong place, by a lot." That's when this stopped being about grass and started being about theft. I called Owen Blake, an old union buddy who traded crawling through ceilings for land surveying when his back gave out. And when his truck rolled up, gear rattling, cigarette tucked behind his ear, it felt like reinforcements had arrived. While Owen and his crew set up their tripods, I took a drive to the county recorder's office, that familiar fluorescent hum overhead, the paper and dust smell I'd worked under in half the public buildings in this state, and dug out the original surveys of Cedar Ridge Estates. The math didn't lie. The 2019 survey said my lot went a good 18 feet farther than the little plastic stakes pretending to mark my boundary now. And there, stapled neatly a year later, sat a corrected version, signed by Grant Pierce, licensed contractor and head of Pierce Premier Builders, the man who, according to Mallory, knew exactly where every line in this neighborhood was. By midweek, Owen had walked the whole block, spray paint marking reality over fiction, and his verdict was simple and lethal. "Logan, that woman's been driving 20 feet inside your property. Her stone wall's 4.5 feet over your line. And she's not just doing it to you. I count 6 houses where the Pierces stole slivers of land and hid it in paperwork." Suddenly, tire tracks weren't just disrespect. They were criminal trespass, and that fancy retaining wall by Mallory's driveway was an illegal structure on my land, built with her husband's signature under a falsified survey. When I confronted her with the stamped report, the way her face shifted from shock to rage to icy contempt would have been funny if it hadn't been so familiar. "You really think some union guy with a used truck is going to outplay us?" she hissed, stepping in close enough that her perfume nearly choked me. "We are Cedar Ridge. We know the inspectors, the council, the board, and people who push us don't last long here." And she wasn't bluffing. A few days later, a city code enforcement pickup pulled into my drive, and out stepped Caleb Foster, clipboard in hand, eyes dull like a man who's been saying, "I'm just doing my job for too many years." He wrote me a $1,200 citation for unpermitted electrical installations after staring blankly at my low-voltage landscape wiring, and the tape measure snapping back into his case sounded exactly like it did when some hack inspector tried to ding our crew at a hospital job because a developer needed a scapegoat. I've spent my life buried in the National Electric Code, so that night, in the glow of my kitchen light, I printed our city's ordinance on low-voltage lighting just to make sure I wasn't crazy, and there it was, no permit required under 30 volts. I called my old foreman, Roy Daniels, who'd wired half this town before he retired, and he confirmed what I already knew. If Caleb was writing that kind of ticket, it wasn't ignorance, it was favors. So I dug deeper. Public records requests. Complaint logs. For a guy who spent decades pulling cable through hospital attics, sorting paper in a quiet office was nothing. The pile that came back told the whole ugly story. 47 complaints in 18 months, all signed by Mallory Pierce, all aimed at the same type of people. Older homeowners, young families, anyone without money or connections, and Caleb Foster's signature on a disturbing number of fines, while Grant's project sailed through approvals like they were on greased rails. The neighborhood wasn't just annoyed with Mallory, it was scared of her, until little by little, people realized I wasn't backing down. At Redwood Supply and Hardware, over the smell of cutting oil and coffee, Frank Russo introduced me to Mrs. Lillian Brooks, 78, cardigan button wrong, eyes sharp as a voltmeter, who'd been taking notes on Mallory in a spiral notebook for 2 years, dates, times, threats, bogus complaints about bird feeders and mail carriers. Once the truth started leaking, others came out. The Colemans who'd lost 8 feet of side yard, the Rivera family who'd moved in and almost immediately discovered their fence line cut their actual lot by 15 feet, all their stories overlapping like wiring diagrams in a panel about to overload. That's when I went to see Monica Leary, a real estate attorney downtown whose office smelled like fresh toner and quiet danger, slid Owen's survey across her polished desk, and watched one eyebrow climb as she flipped pages. "You've got civil claims here big enough to retire twice," she said, tapping the signatures from Grant and the bogus corrections. "Property fraud, abuse of process, probably conspiracy if we can tie the inspector in." But you said you're an electrician, right? You like permanent fixes. What if, I asked, trying to keep the grin out of my voice, I install a decorative concrete bollard on my land to keep cars off my lawn, fully up to code, fully within my boundary? Her smile went cold and delighted. As long as it's safe, visible, and on your parcel, Mr. Carter, you have every right. So I called Javier Ortiz over at an industrial concrete yard I'd used for pole foundations, ordered one reinforced bollard to my specs, 42 inches above ground, 8 inches across, steel rebar cage inside, 5-foot deep footing below the frost line, 4,000 psi mix, topped with a nice granite cap, and stood with a tape measure at dawn, watching past footage of Mallory's car, mapping exactly where her front right will hit my lawn at 7:47 a.m. I didn't need to guess. I had data, angle of approach, speed, tire line, and I placed that footing exactly 8 inches inside my surveyed line, the way I'd always placed critical infrastructure, precise, legal, immovable. By the time Javier's crew left, our corner smelled like wet cement and victory, the bollard standing there quietly in a ring of fresh mulch and solar lights, a polite little exclamation point on the sentence, "This is mine." The morning Mallory came back from her beach vacation, the sun was bright, the street was quiet, and I was at my usual post behind the kitchen glass, coffee in hand, watching the corner of Cedar Ridge Way where her white BMW always appeared, a streak of speed and entitlement in German metal. She took the turn exactly like she always did, too fast, too wide, cutting that illegal line across my grass. Only this time, there was something waiting there that didn't care about money, or board positions, or who her husband played golf with. The sound when her passenger wheel met 42 inches of reinforced concrete was almost beautiful, a sharp metallic bang, a low crunch, the pop of a tire losing an argument with an object that does not move. The SUV lurched sideways, nose dropping, plastic and metal grinding, hazard lights blinking like a silent apology. Steam hissed, fluids dripped. A very expensive symbol of power sat crippled on a lawn it had never had permission to touch. She exploded out of the driver's seat, yelling words I won't repeat, jabbing a manicured finger at the bollard, at me, at the sky, calling 911 to report a dangerous trap and attempted murder by landscaping. And I just stepped out on my porch, survey in one hand, coffee in the other, and said, as calmly as I could, "It's a decorative garden post, Mrs. Pierce, 8 inches inside my property line, installed to protect my home." The responding officer, Officer Nate Ramirez, a guy I'd seen around job sites before, measured from bollard to line, listened to Mallory brag, on body cam no less, that she'd been driving that route for months, and quietly explained that what she'd confessed to was trespassing, and that my concrete wasn't going anywhere. If she'd stopped there, called a tow, swallowed the bill, maybe this story wouldn't have gone any further. But people like Mallory don't know when to quit. Within days, she was on the phone with some sketchy heavy equipment operator, recorded by Mrs. Brooks saying things like, "Make it look like utility work," and "I'll handle the paperwork with the city." And when a backhoe showed up on my grass one morning with no gas company, no water crew, no markings, I was already on the line to dispatch. By the time the bucket scraped the concrete, 2 patrol cars had rolled up, and the operator, staring at 3 uniforms and my camera aimed right at him, decided he didn't love Mallory enough to go to jail for her, played the audio of her offering him cash to get rid of that thing and blame it on a water main repair, and the whole house of cards came down in real time. She was arrested on the spot for fraud, attempted vandalism, impersonating utility work, all while screaming that this entire town is corrupt and you people are jealous of success. And that would have been satisfying enough. But we were way past lawns and bollards now. With Monica Leary, Owen Blake, Calvin Reed, and half the cul-de-sac behind me, those surveys and complaint logs landed not just in front of the city council, but on the desk of Agent Lauren Price with the FBI. The council meeting where it all went public felt like a small-town movie. Packed chamber, folding chairs scraping, 3 local news crews pointed at a projector where Monica walked everyone through the before and after property lines. The string of bogus complaints, the fast-track permits for Grant Pierce and Pierce Premier Builders, and the way certain city employees, like Caleb Foster, just happened to be involved every time land shifted mysteriously toward the Pierces. Then Agent Price stood up in the back badge glinting in the fluorescent light, and announced a federal investigation into construction fraud and municipal corruption spanning 4 counties, with Cedar Ridge Estates as one of the anchor cases. Surveys forged, land stolen, homeowners squeezed with bogus code citations until they gave up and moved. Corrections hiding tens of thousands of square feet of stolen property value. In the end, the paper did what concrete started. Mallory took a plea deal. Prison time, restitution, barred from serving on any HOA or board for life. Grant lost his license and his business, and a bunch of city staff quietly disappeared from their desks as indictments rolled in. The families who'd lost slivers of their yards got deeds corrected. One couple who'd been pushed into selling actually got their house back, and the Cedar Ridge Community Association got rebuilt from the ground up, this time with open books and term limits. As for me, my settlement from the civil side went straight into the Cedar Ridge Justice Fund, a pot to pay lawyers for neighbors when contractors or boards tried this nonsense again. Mrs. Lillian Brooks runs it like a retired general, files stacked, cookies always in the oven. We've already helped an older couple recover money from a roofing scam and stopped a developer from nibbling away at the school playground for parking. Emily's health didn't magically cure itself. Life isn't that neat. But the shaking in her hands eased when the letters stopped coming, when the knocks on the door weren't threats, when the yard she looks out on every morning is safe, green, and undeniably ours. Around the base of that bollard, now officially marked with a little plaque that reads Cornerstone of Cedar Ridge, where we drew the line. She planted rosemary and lavender, and on summer nights, we sit on the porch, listen to the sprinklers hiss, and watch kids from up the street race their bikes around the corner, staying neatly on the pavement. The bullies who thought they owned our block are gone. The concrete still stands. The neighborhood knows where its boundaries are now, on paper, in dirt, and in our heads. So here's what I keep asking myself, and what I'll ask you. When someone like Mallory Pierce decides your property, your peace, your family's sanity are just speed bumps on their shortcut, how far is too far when you push back? At what point does not wanting trouble turn into letting people walk all over you? And when justice finally lands, prison, restitution, public shame, is that enough? Or do we owe each other more? Like building systems and communities that make sure the next bully never gets that much power in the first place.